from our tradition, the biggest goal of lucid dreaming is to give you a complete, deep understanding that there is something after death, that your consciousness survives the death process, the physical death process. That's a fear of the unknown, ultimate fear of the unknown. And that weighs on people to different degrees their whole lives, whether it's in the background and you don't think about it when you're younger because you think death is so far away from you or whatever. Um, and then as you get older and older, you start thinking more about it and it starts to creep in on you, right? But because you now have lost that, like there's nobody that can tell you whether they tell you that's a fantasy, it's a this, it's a that, you didn't really do it, oh, it's just a dream, don't think about it. The visceral experience of that is such because all of that energy that was pent up around that fear of death has gone, right? You may not know what the transition will be. You may not know where you're ultimately going to go, but you know that you continue. That alone is worth the price of admission.
Hey everyone, and welcome to this episode of the To Be Silent podcast. Today, we're talking about lucid dreaming, and specifically, we are initiating the second stage of our lucid dreaming program. In the first stage of our lucid dreaming program, which you can access the episodes of that on Spotify, YouTube, and through our website under the free episodes, um, we talked a lot about many of the foundational techniques that are very common to the lucid dreaming communities and the kind of the basics of starting to get into a lucid dreaming state on a regular basis, remembering your dreams more, um, doing things like reality checks and meditations that would spontaneously induce uh, lucid dreams, um, you know, on a semi-regular basis. But as we move into the second stage of lucid dreaming, we are talking about getting into the lucid dreaming state with greater consistency and with the goal in mind of being able to do it multiple times a week and to be able to do it um, through the wake induced lucid dreaming method and to be able to do that on basically any night that you choose. You set up that night you're going to have a lucid dream, you get up at a specific time, you um, do a meditation, or you relax the body and you consciously enter into a lucid dream, and then you're able to stay there for as long as you wish to stay there and do whatever practices or experiences that you would like to have or do while you're there. And so in today's conversation, this is kind of an initiation of me working on that second stage. And so for this conversation, we talked a lot about what are the motivations behind getting into that state to begin with, because at least my experience of doing it has been quite challenging. My experience of getting into lucid dreaming with any kind of regularity has been pretty challenging. And so we talk a lot about that. What are the motivations? Because one of the practices that we teach with anything that we do is this practice of writing out what do you want and why do you want it, and really going as deep as possible into the origins of your motivations and understanding what you're doing and why you're doing it, so that as challenges come up, you're able to move through that because you kind of have this, like, you have, not only do you have the excitement of doing the practice and the potentials for it, but you kind of are bringing yourself into alignment around pursuing it. So that's what today's conversation really helped me to do, and I hope that it helps you do the same. Uh, Enjoy the show, and thanks for watching.
So we're thinking about sort of shifting a bit and putting more emphasis, which I've always wanted to do in general, more, a little more emphasis on the dreaming parts of the training and, um, specifically lucid dreaming, but the pathway to lucid dreaming most of the time is good dreaming practices, right? So, and that can literally start from like, and just, generally speaking, like knowing that the subconscious mind only speaks in symbols, right? So, asking the questions at night, those types of things. I mean, keeping a dream journal, which seems to be ubiquitous across all traditions, as far as that goes. Eventually, you'll use it less and less, but initially, it's just to sort of build up, the amount of mental energy that you're putting toward the practice of dreaming or dreaming specifically, whether it's just fascination or whatever, it doesn't really seem to matter in the beginning. It's more like the more you try to remember, in detail or remember numbers of dreams, that type of thing, anything that's putting your attention on that for any length of time sort of builds up in the subconscious mind that this is important, right? So, and
And
it
why?
should produce more and more of that phenomena for you.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, to me, I feel like that's maybe one of the best places to start, even before the idea of like looking at the symbolic nature of dreams, is like, why is it important? And like, why is it valuable? Like, because even when I've been thinking about putting more attention and energy into the lucid dreaming and
Hmm.
working more on the wake induced lucid dreaming practices so I can like make it more consistent and more
Yeah.
stable and stuff like that. Um, Beyond like some of the like upper level tiers of like ability in that realm and like what, kind of going beyond what is, like it's kind of like the 4 minute mile thing, right? Like kind of
Right.
going beyond what the general consensus is of like what's normal or possible in the lucid dreaming territory, which I feel like we could talk about for a little while
Ever.
too. But like even like putting the capacity for staying there as long as you want, getting in with basically perfect consistency, um, you know, um, all those things and more aside, shared lucid dreaming, like even like before getting to like those things and knowing like okay that's cool, that's exciting, like what is like the core, what is so valuable about being able to spend more time in your subconscious consciously, um like what are you kind of getting out of that on a regular basis that's so valuable in your daily life, because you've made conscious and consistent lucid dreaming like a huge part of your life, more than anybody else that I know or have ever talked to or encountered or read books by and stuff like that. Um, and I know that like, you were kind of fueled by an enthusiasm for it from things like Castaneda, um, and then your own experiences kind of compounding on themselves and just having it be like, oh, this is an exciting territory, I want to open this up, I want to make this more like a waking part of my experience on a regular basis, and I want to be able to do things here and maybe work on my spiritual practices here, et cetera, on and on
Sure.
and on. But like to me it all just also fits into like a bigger picture of like the end goal of a spiritual practice in general, and also within the context of like how is that like really tangibly like improving my life, solving problems, helping me, making things more preferable to me or more fulfilling or more uh you know uh, less chaotic, um
Right.
like
Right.
I don't know if you can like talk about that, because I do feel like in some ways it is still like I'm not just asking because I want people to hear your answer. I'm genuinely asking for myself, like because I still feel like there is some incongruency or sense of lack in my real understanding of like why that's so valuable to begin with, because it is like one of the things that I've been thinking about lately is like I've talked about before, like right now, depending on when people are listening to this or whatever, we just passed the winter solstice. I've been resting a lot more than any time in my life ever. um Also knowing that like the next thing that I want to do is like put more energy on lucid dreaming, and knowing that like is going to require a consistent, concerted effort on my part to like push, make to open that territory up more. And that's a
Right.
phase of growth. It's a phase of like, it's an effort. It's a sacrifice of time on other things. It
But
requires
not
my
that
attention.
much.
Yeah, but it also requires like getting up
You
and
gotta sleep anyway.
no, yeah, you got to sleep, but like, but I think of like, but I don't like, I think of the first phase of the lucid dreaming course that we did as being like the you gotta sleep anyway phase. This
Right.
phase is like I'm getting up in the middle of the night to do a wake induced lucid dreaming practice and going back to sleep. And I might do that once a night. There might be nights where I do like where I get up to do a wake induced lucid dream practice once, then go back to sleep for an hour and a half, then get up and do it again, then go back to sleep for an hour and a half, then get up and do it again.
Correct.
Like there's so it's a disruption in, of your sleeping process. And for me, like my experience with it so far has been um um most of the time that I get up to attempt a wake induced lucid dream, where basically, like, so part of the practice is like, okay, get up, do this meditation where I'm consciously relaxing the body. I'm imagining myself being in a specific location within my subconscious, and I'm training
Hmm.
myself to do that. So I'm kind of like getting into it, not just any dream, but a specific dreaming spot that I can then
Sure.
navigate from to like increase the stability of the transition, and also my stability of my experience within that, because I'm always starting from almost like a known territory within my
Correct.
subconscious. Like even those ideas are like I don't hear anybody talking about that on the internet, which or anywhere in books, anything. So I think
Right.
that that's pretty unique to like what you teach and the, kind of the attitude that you've approached this with. But like the process of training yourself to be able to do that consistently, in my experience so far, has looked like a bunch of failure and a bunch of sleep loss without getting in most of the time. So,
Right.
and then it's like, so in the beginning of the practice and, or for some period of time, I'm kind of like, I'm not saying like, oh, it's gonna be difficult and, I'm gonna be tired whenever I'm trying to do this and it's just gonna suck. But like in the beginning, my experience so far has been like not benefit, but only like disturbance in the available energy that I have for like my life and just like, you know, doing well in my daily life, basically,
Yeah.
So it's been a
Yeah.
detractor more than but I know that like there's benefit beyond the challenge of it, beyond the initial detraction of it from, or the initial disturbance of it in the, my daily life. So I guess it's kind of like, how can I paint a picture with a clear understanding of like, here's what this looks like when you can get past that, when you can get through the
Mm.
difficulty of that, um, because I think that's not really well understood. So I'm kind of asking more for like from your experience of it, like maybe it's like how did how has your life tangibly improved as your dreaming has improved? It's like that kind of maybe
Yeah.
that's the right way to
Yeah.
approach it.
I mean, it's sort of like when we go, if I look at it, and maybe this is just my way of thinking about it and perceiving it and what I thought of how it got going, besides knowing that it was an actual real practice, like early in my or late in my teens, once I moved away from home or that kind of thing. And I didn't know that that's what I was doing. You know,
What do
I
you mean you didn't know that
I
that's
didn't
what
know I was lucid dreaming
as
as
a
a
young
as
person?
a child, yeah,
Yeah.
from a very young age all the way up, and but not super consistently, not like now, but consistently, and but always around the same sort of parameters, like repetition dreams, especially a few in particular, right? Um, but so I just thought it was a I just took it as a natural thing. I didn't have an aversion to it, or I didn't have a desire to do more of it because I didn't think that I thought it was something that was happening on its own. And to some degree, obviously it was, right? So, because I wasn't inducing it that I know of anyway, at least I can't go back in time and think about, the first time that happened. Did I do something during the day that would have triggered that at night or whatever? I can't go back and think that. I wasn't taking notes on it on the time because I just thought it was a natural phenomenon. I didn't think it was anything. I thought it was just kind of like, oh yeah, I have these dreams, you know. Um, I didn't discuss it with people because I didn't, maybe there would have been somebody that would have said, "Hey, I think you're having a lucid dream," or what, or "Oh,
Yeah,
I've had those before." It's like that would have blown me away, really, to be honest with you.
maybe that
Um,
was my mistake. As a kid, I remember thinking like, oh, I wonder if I can stay conscious and go into my dreams and trying to do it. And then like talking to people about it and being them being like, oh no, that's not possible. You can't do that.
you can't do that, right? Yeah. So,
And
and
then I
those
just
things
basically
get piled
dropped it
up.
from then because I
Right.
was probably like,
Right.
oh, okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm just, fantasizing about it or whatever,
Yeah.
So, oh, I can drop that for something that's more important. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So, you know, once I knew that it was a thing, that other people had done it as well, right? And that it was something that could be cultivated and made better, potentially. Um, and it was, on the outer fringes of what I was training at the time, it was there as a technique. Um, uh, there that style of practice or that tradition that I was practicing at the time when I knew that was very similar to like a tribal kind of thing, like the Castaneda thing, where there wasn't a lot of information given, there wasn't a lot of rules given, right? It was like, do this, find your hands. Like, okay, years go by and you still haven't found your hands. And then one day, boom, you find them, right? And it's almost like surprising to you when it happens. So there really isn't they're very laconic with their information. It seems like with indigenous societies or even traditions that sort of hearken to or are part of that, shamanic tradition, regardless of where in the world it is. Um, they really um, they really leave it to the individual. They sort of give you a, a difficult test in some way. And it doesn't matter how long it takes for you to do it. They want to see if you're persistent. They want to see if you have the tenacity to stick with it, right? The results are almost not as important initially as are you still doing it? And then tell me what's happening and then with that little information that you're giving them, they're saying, okay, it sounds like you're here. Let me, try this little augmentation and see. It's the same exercise, but with this little thing and see if that helps. I would literally have to go back in my notebooks and look at all those little augmentations to see how many of those that, I was given at different times to see if it would trigger something, make it easier, make it more vivid, all of those things. When I think about it from today's perspective, a lot of people that are, uh, regardless again of the tradition, definitely all of the shamanic traditions, especially modern people trying to do shamanism, right? Um, uh, and a lot of the magical traditions and things like that, Western magic, ritual magic, ceremonial magic, all of that stuff. One of their one of the things that they all strive to achieve is to be able to um, achieve either a visionary state that's so real that you can't tell it from physical reality, right? Um, or to be able um, to see energy is another one of those holy grail things, and that also, I would also include that sort of in between those two, um, like the ability to be able to, project symbols or things of that nature and actually, to your eyes, maybe not apparent to anybody else in the room, but to your eyes, have them be able to be sustained without effort, as if they are physical images in the air. They may be slightly transparent, they may not be, but to become more and more realistic, right? More and more um, where you can perceive them easily in the physical environment. Those are all things that, all of these practitioners, regardless of their competency, whether they're newbies or not, they all strive to achieve that at some territory, right? Those are all like real high benchmarks of mastery of these things. And there are very few people that, other than just practicing it over and over and over again, they don't, they not the older traditions, but a lot of the traditions that are just we get from books now or from different things like that, they give very, very little information or guidance on those little nuanced practices that are a little bit ancillary to the primary practice that cause you to trip into that, right? Or to make that stronger, to make that an eventuality. And
To make those abilities realized.
correct, yeah, so that you could do them, at will, right? I mean, that's the idea. Anybody can have a one-off on a good day or a bad day, depending on what it is,
Right.
right? So, but to be able to consistently do it, there's very little information out there. Uh, that describes those things or tells you what to change or how to do that. Part of it is that it is a little bit personal, right? Like if you have direct contact with somebody that you're teaching over a period of time, right? You get to know them. Hopefully, you get to know their personalities, their likes and dislikes, all of those things. And so, the better you have a sense of that, the better you are equipped to, out of all of these little nuances that you could give them, this one looks like it would fit your profile, at this time to help you move into that place, right? Um, and then, you get
But
other,
so
go
what's
ahead.
the benefit of that place? Because the other thing that I've heard, like for instance, Sadhguru talk about is like I listened to one of his lectures where he was saying like or talks or whatever, where he was talking about that, where he was saying like basically I've heard him say it two different times when your imagination becomes as real as your physical senses, or when you've heightened it to that degree, he's
Yep.
like, that's when you have to be very cautious because
Right.
because you can get into a place where you think the things that you're seeing are real or real or not real. You have to be able to differentiate between like I'm creating that or that's a real thing that I'm
It's
observing or
spontaneously happening,
right,
without
right,
me, right?
right. Or and then in a separate on a separate occasion he said like um you know in the same instance when dreaming becomes as real as physical reality, it's also the same thing. Like it's basically like get your shit together because like
And hopefully you get your shit together before that happens. I
right.
think there's a natural inclination for that to be the case.
You
It's
mean
like
like a
part
natural evolutionary process where like
correct.
it's almost
Like
like you have to
you
from
have to be able to control these things, and to be able to do certain practices easily or at a higher level so that you can exert that kind of control, that you have that discernment that's going on.
so basically just to summarize like where we're at right now in terms of our conversation, like I've laid out like the initial process of doing it is replete with challenge and sleep loss and sacrifice and attention and like discomfort, kind of, and also kind of your conscious mind being and I know we were talking about that before, but that probably won't get into the recording that we're doing right now. But like, just your conscious mind being uh naturally afraid of the unknown. So there's that, right? But then also like even if you can get into that territory or bring your imagination up to that high level of proficiency to be able to imagine something, hanging in the air in front of you, even if it's like you're taking a pen and you can be like, oh, I'm going to imagine the pen floating in front of my face and it's right there. And then you can see it, you know, being the same as like making your lucid dreaming just as stable and real to you and as your physical life and all that. Like being so it's like okay, discomfort, challenge, fear of the unknown combined with even once you get there or as you're developing it, that being like a place that's from experts, let's say, they're saying be cautious about that because it's also there's some, let's say, danger associated with it or whatever. Like where's the benefit? like
Where's
like
the plus sign?
where's the plus sign? I'm sure there is one. I just don't understand exactly what it is.
Yeah. I mean, I think part of it is, um, as a human being, we crave to some degree, again, everybody's a little different, right? We crave the novelty, right? To some degree or another. Some people just they live for it, right? They want new experiences all the time. And other people, they're much more comfortable with far less of that, right? Some people, maybe even like in general, like people on the spectrum that need such a strong, routine that never breaks course that's their comfort zone, right? Like anything new is a complete trauma for them. And so there's a huge continuum there, right? So, but for most of us, let's say plus minus, we like a little novelty in our lives in different areas, right? So it's a thing. And so um it doesn't get much more novel than that. I mean, than a lucid dream, right? Because you're consciously aware in your dream that you're dreaming, right? And that you have a certain element of control, right? I mean, for I remember my first experience of conscious experience of knowing what it was and then sort of going, oh my God, this is true. I didn't disbelieve it. I mean, I wanted to believe it, but there's always that until you experience it, there's always that part that says, you know, eh, maybe not for you, or maybe you're not good enough to do that, or
Oh, I
maybe it's
definitely
true,
feel
but
that way.
you'll never do it, or it just definitely isn't true, and you're just wasting your time,
I
and
mean, and
effort
I
and
say that,
energy.
and I say that as I've had plenty of lucid dreams, so I know that it's not like not. I know it's possible for me because like I've had the experience and
Sure.
worked at it over time and all that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but I still feel that way about like doing it the way that we're talking about with the consistency, with the control, with the
Sure.
you know.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Yeah. So I mean, again,
and
not
novelty excites me. I mean,
of
I've done
course.
plenty of like plant medicine and things of that nature,
Sure.
and
Sure.
plenty of experiences that have, and not only the novelty of the experience itself of altered, let's say, experiences of themselves, but also, let's say, the insights or deeper understanding or things that I learn from those experiences. Though, I mean, that's definitely exciting to me. I mean, do you think that that's maybe like the best analogy for somebody who's done um, plant medicine of some kind? Uh, would that
It
be kind
can
of like
be. I mean, again, the biggest challenge with plant medicine is not just surviving the experience, right? It's the integrating the information that you received, understanding it at a deeper level, hopefully,
right?
bringing that back with you, much like a dream, right? You're bringing it
Yeah,
back through a place where it seems very clear to you at the time, like infant crystal clear at the time, right? And then you bring it back and it starts to fade and it starts to, unravel a little bit. And then you're sort of guessing here or there. But then the even harder challenge is how do you integrate it into your daily life? The parts that had meaning for you, right? Like if you're getting
mm,
some life lessons or something like that, right?
yeah,
So, and that happens especially if you're asking questions, you're engaging it in that way.
right.
Uh,
You're not just doing it and
you're
then
not just an observer,
right.
like
You're go, but
observing things going through, right?
yeah,
You're
you're
actually
going
in it.
you go into the experience with a specific intent or question in mind. You're
Correct.
having a conversation with the energy of that plant, let's say, or
Right, right, right.
yes.
Exactly. So, all of those things will help to sharpen the experience, in that way. Um, so, I would say it is a very similar process with lucid dreaming. It's like, and again, the hardest thing is to integrate it into your, daily existence, right? The information, you don't want to just, you know, act on it as if it was set in stone, right? Like, because everything, there's always a chance that you're going to misinterpret the symbols. There's always a chance that the symbolic is going to go, the real lesson is going to go over your head because you're not really, it's very hard in the beginning to not take things literally because that's the way, that's so common for us to engage that way. Hey, Dustin, you want to go to lunch? Lunch, hunger. Yeah, this is the time. Yeah, sure, let's go to lunch. And what do you want to eat? Oh, we're going to go here. We're going to go there. We're going to do, it's a very literal thing. It's not like
Yes.
I'm not waiting to hear your stomach grumbling before I go, dude, are you hungry? Let's go get something to eat, right?
For instance, like if a friend of yours came to you in a lucid dream and said, like, "Oh, I have some type of ailment or something like that," um, and you interpret it as that person literally has that ailment instead of
and
like,
that person literally has come to you in your dream.
right, right, right. And that's what I'm saying. But but it may be because you're in your subconscious that it's what that person symbolically represents to you as an aspect of yourself having that ailment. What does that mean to you, like as a reflection of yourself, not
Right.
this person literally has this and you need to do something about it right now.
Yeah,
Like so
you need to do an intervention on them.
right, right, right. So like and maybe that's a good example of what somebody like Sadhguru means when they say like that you need to kind of develop the balance, the clarity, the discernment, and and understanding, and that kind of sets the groundwork for being able to be within that dimension of experience and integrating it into your life in a good way and not having it be just a disruptor basically because
Right.
you're not understanding what yeah, like what the communication means in that place or what
Exactly.
things
Well, I
mean.
mean, this is what wisdom is, right? Wisdom isn't just the experience or having the knowledge or intellect of understanding. Wisdom is understanding and knowing how or when to apply it or to do anything about it, right? So it's this deeper discernment of the whatever you're going through and being able to tease out, is this something I need to act on? Is this something that I need to just sit on and sort of observe? Do I need more information? All of those things come under the heading of wisdom as far as that goes, right? So, and I think that's what he means is that, those people, I mean, even in these, seminars, week-long seminars for different shamanic traditions or whatever, that they're modern shamanism, right? Um, they will even instruct one of the few sort of warning instructions they give people is that like when you've been away for a week in group mind or whatever, right? And where you can sort of bare your soul to all these people of like mind, to one degree or another. And then go back to your old life, right? That part hasn't changed. And so, people will go into this thing called like reintegration depression. So, because now they have to suppress that part of them that they're so excited about for a week, for, day and night they're bonding with these people that they barely knew and now they're their best friends, right? Or and they tell them, like when you go home, don't mortgage your house, don't make any giant decisions, don't divorce, don't do this, don't do that, right? Like you need to stew in this. You need to acclimate to this new way of living so that things that seem so poignant to you right now will settle, in a place where you can actually be discerning about it, right? And not just reacting to it. It's one more thing to just react to this new thing. And um, yeah, it's sort of very similar to, people who go to a rock climbing gym for the first time and they have such a fun time that they go out and buy thousands of dollars of equipment to try to go on a rock, on a real rock, right? It's very this is a very common phenomena, right? It's like the guy that takes a guitar lesson and falls in love with it, one lesson, and then goes out and is capable of buying a $5,000 guitar. Like this is insanity. Okay. Unless you're a billionaire, like that's a nickel, So it for
Or a
most
half a
people,
million dollar sports car you don't know how to drive.
there you go. And you wrap it around a tree and lose your life, or worse, you just become crippled and the rest of your life changes for as long as you can stay alive, right? So it's yeah, those things are, our suppressed spirit, especially from our society, is such that I think even more so in this country, we are we're very exposed to have that happen to us, right? And we really have to be able to sort of put the brakes on and really understand that about ourselves and say like, wow, I just had such a good time doing this. It's like, um, uh, and oh, this is where I belong. I found my home. I found my thing. I found my stuff. I found my people. And then you just cast everything else to the wind that you've built in your life and just go there. And then as things settle, you start going, oh, the grass isn't greener on the other side of the fence. It's exactly the same green, just a different blade of grass. And so you end up with the same problems that you had before, just in a different scenario, right? So it takes time to acclimate to these things. So, my advice with that is, yes, if you can get to a state, first and foremost, and this is my traditional training, first and foremost, um, if you have this as one one thing to prove to yourself beyond the part of I can do this lucid dreaming, I can have a lucid dream where I consciously know that I'm in a dream. My conscious mind is working in this dream. I identify it as a dream and wow, right? Even if it's that and because of the shock of it, right? You snap back. That was mine. My first one was like that. It was only a few seconds and it was like, holy shit, this is really happening. This is real. And snapping back. But I felt like I mean, like I said before, jokingly, it's like you won't go back to sleep. I couldn't go back to sleep after that. And it wasn't because I kept trying and trying and trying again, right? Like I couldn't calm down. I had so much energy. I paced the bedroom for an hour and then finally like wandered into the rest of my apartment at the time, and just like I mean, I wrote things down, took the notes, did all these things, right? But at the same time, I was just so enthralled with the thing. I couldn't believe the energy. And I don't think that I've ever had anything excite me as much that gave me so much energy on a first time basis. And I remember at the time asking my teacher, telling him, that I had had that. And I said, but I feel like I'm still on high. Like I remember this was the next day in the afternoon when I first saw him, and I was like, I don't understand. How is this so keeping me so excited, keeping me so, energized? And he just laughed and he said, well, you know, from our tradition, the biggest part, the biggest goal of lucid dreaming is to, let's not say convince, what's a better, to give you a complete uh deep understanding that there is something after death, that your consciousness survives the death process, the physical death process. And because of that, he was very logical in his explanation. He said, that's a fear of the unknown, ultimate fear of the unknown. And that weighs on people to different degrees their whole lives, whether it's in the background and you don't think about it when you're younger because you think death is so far away from you or whatever. And then as you get older and older, you start thinking more about it and it starts to creep in on you, right? Um, but because you now have lost that, like there's nobody that can tell you whether they tell you that's a fantasy, it's a this, it's a that, you didn't really do it, oh, it's just a dream, don't think about it. The visceral experience of that is such because all of that energy that was pent up around that fear of death has gone, right? You may not know what the transition will be. You may not know where you're ultimately going to go, but you know that you continue. That alone is worth the price of admission. Imagine if you're starting this when you're 35, 40, 50 years old, how much pent up anxiety and whatever, no matter how little or how much, but built up from the time that you realized that death was a thing and that you were going to go there, that's sort of built up and weighed you down year after year after year. And when that's released, that
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it weighs me down
there's a
now.
lightening of you, right? And
And I
so,
and I would say, I've had many lucid dreams now, but I still feel that way. I
mm,
think part of it is like most of my lucid dream experiences, like I just they haven't been very, they still feel very like uh heavy without control or clarity. Um,
hmm.
and so my only experience, like if I was going to say, oh, death would be like that or analogous to that, I'm like, I don't see how that's any better than my unconscious dreams, other than I have some semblance of awareness of what's happening, like,
Right, 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 right.
it's
And I
still like,
guess from his
there,
standpoint, it was more like, the biggest question wasn't, is there heaven? Is there hell? Is there any of that stuff? It was more like, do you just end? Is that it? You know, at best, your
right.
100 years of experience is just over and you're nothing. You're no more. You hit the wall, whatever. And he thought that was the part that most people were carrying with them, that they were afraid of that the best meal you've ever eaten is coming to an end and you're never going to get that again, you know, and that is a fear that builds up over time. And um, yeah. So the other part is all kind of like, because you kind of have to believe in an afterlife to believe in a heaven and a hell, right? You got to believe that you know, that things will continue. I think the biggest fear is that people think it just ends, and there's nothing.
Mhm.
And, you know, so, for him, that was the thing that when he looked at me, he was like, well, I mean, I was practicing that tradition at the time. So it was like, he was like, this is initially why we do this. Now, if you want to continue it, now we can go and do these other things, right? But it's like that's the first thing. It lightens you. You don't have to carry that burden around with you. You don't have to be afraid of this thing. It's like you're just going to go and do it, and that's it. And so, um, but then there's all the exploratory stuff, and then working the exercises through that, and
You mean
uh,
doing
in the
spiritual
lucid dream,
practices?
all the practices in there, because again, every practice that we do here is trying to incorporate in some way the subconscious, right? Trying to get the help of that more expansive vision, the more expansive, being able to visualize as clearly as seeing your physical reality. Those are the ultimate goals for these things, right? To be able to work through these exercises that way, right? Like
And
in a visionary state, right? So you close your eyes, you just have a different view, right? It's just, I open my eyes, I don't question that the computer's here, my canteen or whatever else, the microphone, it's like it's there. I'm in my physical element where I know what reality is here for the most part, right? So, um, but
so
there when you close your eyes and you go and you try to do whether it's shamanic journeying or meditation practices, burning meditation, any of those things, any exercise that's mental where you're trying to visualize something, you know, bringing in the auditory, bringing in the tactile, all of those things. You want it to be, we're always using our physical reality as the gold standard for immersion into that, right? So, um, and I think that the lucid dreaming state is sort of like the ultimate holodeck for those experiences, right? Like you can practice them over and over again here until they just become so commonplace that when you come back to physical reality, when you do them here, it's almost like they become more and more and more akin to your physical reality. You're able to really see things. You're really able to visualize things. You're really able to hear things, tactile sense things. That type of phenomena that's going on there, and you're constantly going back and forth between those two, which makes the two closer to one, right? So
And okay. And so how would you describe how does that benefit you on a daily basis? Like
yeah, well, I mean,
how is that making your life better?
yeah, on the first flush, it makes my practices, way less frustrating than the average bear, right? So, because it doesn't mean that I'm not working at them, but I don't have to how do I say this in the right way? I don't experience the fatigue that a lot of people do by trying to put effort into or force into like a better visualization or a better auditory or tactile sensation or those types of things. It just occurs, you know, more and more systematically over time. And I believe it's from doing it on both sides, both in the lucid dreaming state and then back here again, then the lucid dreaming state and back here again. So you're kind of finding some symbiosis between the two, right? So that the experience there becomes much more, it always feels very real there. And then, your sense of things here seem to when you do let's pick a specific, like if I do the burning meditation there, it's very real, like I do it with the eyes open there, right? Because everything I imagine just happens, right? So I imagine a little cloud comes down and washes through me. I imagine myself sitting under a tree on the edge of a cliff that I know, over the ocean or whatever. I imagine I'm like there, right? I don't have to close my eyes to do it. As soon as I imagine it, it's right there. So the burning part is exactly the same. There's no effort to focus on things and not lose your train of thought or not lose your focus, right? It's like you don't have to visualize a candle. There is a candle there. It's like you're breathing in this golden light. You literally see a beam of golden light coming in. It's like all of those things that we have to visualize here with our eyes closed. It's just happening there, right? From your imagination, faculty. Um, the part that's harder there, right, is that everything you imagine can come into reality for there, right? So, it's like all of a sudden, if there's 100 iridescent butterflies landing on you, that might be a little distracting, It's like, oh, that's okay, you know, or some hairy goat guy next to you going like, "Hey, what are you doing? Can I do this with you?" You and me, we's pals, right? Yeah, move those horns a little farther to the left. It's like so, the funny part is that in the beginning when you're working on your control, right? It's like you can see how, your distraction there, if you want to call it that. I mean, I have a hard time even calling it distraction, but that's pretty much what it is. If what you think at the time or what you actually give a little bit of, even if it's a question like, what if the grass was blue? And you just have a fleeting thought of that, right? It's so difficult to talk about because I say it like that to make reference to what most people would understand here, right? But there really isn't, like, you don't have fleeting thoughts in a lucid dream. It's like you have thoughts, right? Like you consciously have a directed thought, right?
I would say like that's even what you're describing is even a more clear version of a lucid dream because my lucid dreams are I'm still very much grasping for the kind of control or clarity that you're talking about, right? So
Hmm.
it's like I'm awake and aware that I'm dreaming and I have some it's almost like the way what you're describing and the way you're describing it, even with like with the example of doing the burning meditation in a lucid dream,
Sure.
having the control to do that without distraction. Let's say that's like 100% control in your lucid dream, right? And just like as a just for
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
whatever,
absolutely.
that's like level 10, 100% control, right? I can just do that practice for an hour in my lucid dream and like really immerse myself in it and experience it fully. And then when it's done, whatever. And I go on to the next thing or I wake up consciously as an example, right?
Right.
My lucid dreams at this point have been like 10% control, where it's like I feel like I have some influence, but there's a supreme sense of weight and flow and movement happening that I have almost zero control over. So I'm just like it's almost like I'm pushing against a membrane that's like very strong and imposing. And so even the idea of having that level of control is foreign to me. So
Mm,
it's like
mm.
so I can imagine being so clear that not just anything happens, but only what I put my attention on or bring up happens. But it's almost like you're just my lucid dreams are like being lucid in a regular dream,
Yeah, yeah,
where
I
it's
get
like
it. I get it.
now I'm awake and involved in the chaos consciously, but instead of completely unconsciously, but
Right.
it still doesn't feel it still is relatively uncomfortable, doesn't make sense to me uh you know uh, I
Sure.
beyond the fact that I feel a little bit good about myself because I know that I've accomplished something that is one of my goals, like, oh, I feel
Right,
good
right,
about
right.
that.
Well,
I
that's
had a
great.
lucid dream. I know that that's a success. Okay, cool. But like it doesn't go beyond that. It doesn't make me feel like, oh, great, that like let's put more attention on that. I'm like, man, it's still fucking hard and really uncomfortable. So like it's hard and uncomfortable getting there, and it's hard and uncomfortable while I'm there. So it's like, okay. So,
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think part of it is to like attitude, right? Like, I mean, as much as like even as a young person, I wasn't really into games. Still not so much, but I'm better than I used to be, right? And so part of that is learning uh, there is a value to games, right? Which I just never gave them any value, really. Um, and so uh, it wasn't a thing for me until it was explained to me in a way that like how gaming yourself in certain things that you're trying to do actually almost pits you against yourself as a competitor. And you're constantly trying to, like do better, right? Do better against this, do better against that. It's like, and so I would always have like almost a single-minded goal when I would get in, try to get in that night, right? Or until I could get in, I would have this thing that I was going to do, right? And so, and part of it's just remembering that thing when you get in, right? I mean, let's be
when you
honest,
when you
right?
get into a lucid
When
dream,
you get into a lucid dream, it's like remembering, right? That's part of the training is like, how do you remember? How do you remember your other? I mean, you do remember your other life. It's not like you forget who you are or anything like that, right? I mean, that's part of lucidity, but it is sometimes hard to um, remember the details of your physical existence here, right? So one of the training exercises what in the beginning was when you get there the first once you've stabilized, one of the things that you want to try to do is consistently remember like what you had for breakfast. Now, don't cheat and always have exactly the same thing or whatever, or give yourself a tap, tell yourself that day, okay, uh, it could be something ridiculous, that isn't true even, right? Like, um, I had a piece of cherry pie and a cup of cocoa or whatever, for breakfast, right? And
Sounds like
so
an awesome
you've
breakfast.
made that a thing, right? Even though it isn't true, you've made it a thing. This is what I'm going to remember. And so when you get there, you're trying to remember, and it can't be something, if you always have bacon and eggs for breakfast, then it's going to be a little easier for you to pull that through. It's not going to be easy to pull that through, but it's going to be easier because there's just almost like a reflex of it, right? But if you make it something kind of screwy or whatever, remembering that is a good way of sort of making that transition back and forth more consistent, right? Because you're just taking snippets. It's just like trying in the beginning, trying to remember your dreams, right? It's like it's right there, but I just can't, it's that almost the same level of frustration in the lucid dream trying to remember a snippet of, and I use breakfast, but it could be anything, right? Could be any aspect of your day that's relatively consistent. And so, like what did I wear to bed? That kind of thing. A lot of people use that one, right? So, um, and so it's just one of those things where, you know, trying to retrieve information from one side makes it easier to retrieve information from the other. Again, it's that idea, that metaphor of thinning the veil, right? That veil that in the beginning is like the iron wall, right? It's hard to drag information from one side, drag information from the other side. So, but as you do it more and more, again, working both sides to the middle is the quickest way to achieve that merger of the two, right? So doing that can exert some control, right? Aspects of control. You're treating it as if it was the same here. And then you're treating here as if it was the same there, that your reality is a little bit more malleable without trying to jump off a cliff and survive or whatever. You don't want to get stupid about it,
I
right?
see.
So,
So, like, the way I'm interpreting what you're saying beyond the exercise that you described is like to have more control, like I was talking about having like 10, what feels like 10%, to
hmm
increase that. The One of the best ways to do that is to like have a clear idea of when you do become lucid, what you are going to do once you are lucid already in your mind before you get there, instead of like
yes.
popping into lucidity and then just trying to grab hold of the
What
reins of
do
the
I do
thing. And
now?
it's just like, yeah, because I'm just like,
What should I do? And in the what should I do, you give this space time to transition into a regular dream where you're just sort of like, oh, I'm just going to follow the pretty butterfly, or whatever. So it takes
because
you out of lucidity because that's more of the pattern, right? It's all about momentum. And the momentum of being in the physical is so high that it takes extreme effort to bounce you out of that,
what do you
right?
mean by that? Because this I feel like
Like,
is really getting to the point. Like
yeah.
talking about it's all
So
about
like
momentum.
there's a momentum of, consistent like thoughts. Like most people think the same 90% of thoughts that they thought yesterday. And so they get into this mire of the same loop over and over. The 10% is just like, oh, I'm instead of having a burger for lunch, I'm going to have a sandwich for lunch. Or instead of having, but they go to work at the same time. They do the same things on the weekend. They have these routines that are just like on endless loop, right? And so it's so entrenched that anything outside of that novelty that we talked about in the beginning, right, is like a little spike of interest, right? And the same thing can go for this, but it's very hard to break out of
I see. And
that.
because even what you're talking about is like when you say people, we have like 90% of the same thoughts every day. You're not just, and the momentum of like your habitual way of being, it's like those are those are patterns that we are in, that we're not even conscious that we are in the sense that we don't perceive certain aspects of ourself or our life as having the potential to be different. we're just immersed in that pattern so much that we identify it as just simply the way things are without even giving it a label because it's so much a part of our
Yeah.
experience that it's just like implicit. It's just completely subconscious. So it's like,
And not only that, it's all
yeah,
the connections that we have in this world too, in the physical reality, right? Friends, colleagues, intimate partners, work colleagues, all of these things, the buildings that we go in and out of, the cars that we drive, the ways that we get to work, all of these things are entrenched in patterns that are, more and more and more indicative of, our life.
right. I think that, okay, so I think that that is probably the best, getting to the becoming the best articulation for the benefit of lucid dreaming that I have heard from you or that we've had in conversation. Um, because to me, that to me personally, that's probably one of the highest drivers for me. And has been like in my practice. It's one of the things that appeals to me most about doing plant medicine. And, you know, is that like it's and I talk about this with a friend of mine on a semi-regular basis, just like the discomfort that I associate with um, doing psychedelics or plant medicine is the arising sensation of new self-awareness that's like can be very uncomfortable because it's like, and my okay okay on to so and Nils, right? You know my best friend, so he he gave this, I'm going to totally use it, but I have to give him credit. He came up with, to me, the most hilarious and apropos analogy for that. He's like, you're becoming aware that you're a sock puppet and there's a hand inside you, you know? And it's like, right? And
Yes.
and and because and it's like you're becoming aware of like the aspect of you that's actually influencing different aspects of yourself or your life or how things are playing out, and like and those aspects that are subconscious are starting to become conscious, and it's like, oh, I didn't know I was doing that, or that's why I was doing that, or that's why those things are, I'm expressing myself in that way, or people responding me, or this situation is set up that way because of the, it's like you're recognizing your involvement in it, your creation of it, your responsibility for it, but like why and how and all the layers of it start to surface. And it's like, it's so uncomfortable, but afterward, it's like, it's so like, like,
It's so true, though.
right? It's like, it's therapeutic and beneficial and and empowering and positive and clarifying and um I associate it with like the release of tension, the release of anxiety, a feeling of greater like comfort and like awareness of like, oh, that's what I'm doing, that's why things are the way they are. I can shift that if I want to. I have a better understanding of that now. And I feel like what you're saying to some degree is that like that is also to be found in lucid dreaming. And through lucid dreaming, we like kind of temper ourselves so that we can kind of be in that space more and more, or like wake up to more and more of that. Um, and to me, that's beneficial because it's almost like there are, because I guess one of the things I also wanted to touch on with that theme was like, that's like the sensation, the empowering sensation that's associated with that is one of like, oh, I'm not stuck, or I'm not trapped, or I things don't have to
I'm not a
always,
fixed item.
yeah, things don't have to always be this way, or I don't always have to experience the world this way, or feel this way about my life or myself, or yeah, there's like a, okay, things can change, and there there's levels and layers and options and ways to evolve and to be different that I'm not even conscious of right now. But the
Right.
benefit of being conscious of those choices that are available to me is inestimable. Like it's beyond valuable, because it's like you're not even, it's like the whole thing of like you don't know what you don't know. It's like
Right.
you're not even like conscious of the things that you could be conscious. You're not even conscious of the
That there is
categories.
something else to be conscious of.
Right. You're not even conscious of the category of all the categories of things that you or categories of aspects of yourself or your life that you could be conscious of, that you could have some influence over, because you're just so unconscious. It's like, I mean, it's like a feeling of like, oh, like there's discomfort or like whatever associated with it, but getting through it is like so good, So yeah.
Yeah. Until you
Yeah.
realize you're just on a carousel.
Yeah. Yeah. Damn it.
The horror.
You know. Um,
Yeah. So you can see how, like, bringing it back to, like, what you said about like massive effort or whatever. It's like escaping, the gravity of the planet to get off into space, right?
yeah,
How much thrust you have to have, how much whatever
right.
to get through. I mean, it's, and other than wind or whatever, who knows other atmospheric things that would try to take it off its path that they correct for, it's really that main thing that's keeping it from just floating out there, right? Like, if you jumped high enough, you could get out, right? So it's that same thing that says uh, that I'm reading a text from Nina. This is like, yeah, okay, it's good enough. Just wanted to make sure it wasn't anything critical that I didn't have to deal with right now. So yeah, but the same thing with this, right? Because it's not instead of gravity, you have the gravity of the collective and your routine in that, but then that collective holding your routine in place as well, right? Your friends know you're going to be here at this time. They expect you to be there at this time. There's some energetic draw for you to be there at that time. There's all of these factors that are holding you in place. And so one of the things that we do is to try to help break through that, to make it a little bit more malleable, is to, you know, the general term of uh, you know, uh, erasing your personal history, right? Which is a nice poetic way of saying basically start changing things up a little bit. Not to totally disrupt your life, don't be an asshole if you're a nice guy, or don't be this or that, that type of thing. Don't, take an hour long drive to get to work to make it different than, the 20 minutes that you normally get there, right? But just switch up the routes or do this or do that, right? Again, we've said it doesn't take a lot. And that loosening of those very fixed boundaries, very fixed pressures on you. That small novelty of doing those things, stirring your coffee with the opposite hand, you know, it, it, um, having it at a different time, or eating something different, or doing these things, really consciously breaking up the pattern will have this effect of loosening the bound, loosening those fixed restraints on you. And so when you go to, it can be at the same time, but when you go to do lucid dreaming, or you go to start trying to remember more of your dreams or whatever, you'll have a little bit more wiggle room there than normal, right? Because you've already started to loosen those bounds, those bindings a little bit, right? And so there's a little bit more space. Gives you just that little bit of motion to get out there, right? So you're able to move a little more. It doesn't make you a completely different person, those little things like that. It might give you different perspectives, which is already changing the way that you think, right? And it's like signing your name with your opposite hand, 10 times a day for a week, It's like no matter how bad it is, and not being frustrated about that, but laughing about it, right? You're gaming it. Everything is just sort of like you're testing the waters. of all these things. You're very light attitude about it. So you'll go into your dreaming practice the same way. It won't be so serious. It won't be so, you don't want to give your conscious mind even more ammunition to hold you back, right? It's like you want to make it sort of this playful thing, right? I mean, serious but playful attitude about it, right? Um, Nobody does any game expecting to be the world champion on the first try, right? It's like this is like an insanity that pervades a lot of people and keeps them from even trying, right? They need to, not be laughed at. Well, laugh at yourself, for goofing around with this. It's okay, and the value on the other side, very much offsets the effort it takes to do it, right? I think. Otherwise I wouldn't continue to do it, right? It's like, I mean, those benefits keep, piling up more and more. They get more profound as time goes on. Who knows if there'll be an end? I can't imagine that that would be the case, but there's plenty of things that I can't imagine. So, that come to pass. So, but I think that all of those things sort of go together to just to allow yourself to experience it, and then what can I do with this? I mean, I am, as much as all of this seems very fantastical, I'm a pretty utilitarian kind of dude. It's like I like things to have purpose. And even if it was, um, like, uh, let's just say you don't have any interest in the spiritual aspects of it or any of that stuff, but you just, you find it fascinating and, like, maybe adventurous and all of that stuff. Well, you know, I mean, the majority of human beings, at least in the United States, they work hard to get those 2 weeks or so off on vacation every year. Okay. So everything goes toward that. When they come back from their vacation, during the time that they're getting back into the grind, right? They're already thinking about their next vacation, right? And already projecting, forgetting about all the life that happens between there and that vacation time. They're all projecting toward that vacation. Well, I mean, on the most practical side, imagine having that 2 week vacation every night or or twice a week, you know. And you're paying up front for it because you're putting the effort to be able to do it. But the upside of that is it's going to be more luxurious and more adventurous than anybody most of us in the world could afford to have. A better vacation than any of us could afford to do even once in our lifetimes. You could have that every night or even twice a week, once a week. Who cares? If you could do that, do you know how much pressure that would take off your human mind if you weren't like the 2 weeks of vacation doesn't even matter to you anymore because it's not going to be, you're not going to be able to compare to that to what you have on a regular basis, right? It's like you're doing that to spend time with your family and friends and kids and whatever, right? So, you're doing it for them. That's something that you can provide for them. So, but it's not something that you're just like you're totally focused on that and ignoring everything up to that point, right? Just to get to that one little carrot on the end of a stick every year, right? So, um, that I already see that. I don't think that's a waste. It's like that in and of itself is a very big, would be of huge value to most people, I think, if you really desired that. Um, beyond all of the, you know, getting questions answered or running through scenarios that you can actually visually watch or engage in and those types of things, working out problems, thinking of other ways to think about problems, right? It's like breaking out of your routines, doing these things that are, adjusting your routines so that they reflect more of the life that you want rather than the one that you feel pressed into, right?
Right.
And that's it. It's basically, in a word, it's freedom,
Yeah, I
right?
was gonna say flexibility, but freedom. I mean,
I
it's
mean,
both.
that's what most people want. They want freedom in the end. They want to be free to work at something they love. They want to be free to eat the types of foods that they like and enjoy and are good for them. They want to be free to be able to help their friends, their family, their kids, their acquaintances if somebody needed help, that it would be a nothing for them to be able to offer that help or provide that help for them, right? This is all freedom, right? And to be able to do something that you just love doing, right? It's like to be able to move around, to be able to be completely untethered, right?
I
It's
think
like
that that's
that's an
kind of the
ultimate freedom.
and that's coming back to that like sock puppet with the hand inside of you analogy. It's like the realization that you are free, but you know, you kind but you have to do the focused activities, let's say, or apply yourself in the direction that will enable you to realize that freedom or to become aware of it, right? To integrate it, to actually actualize it, let's say, right?
Right. I
Because
mean, that's
until
the
it's
thing.
actually actualized, it isn't, it's only, it only exists in potential.
Right, right. And, I mean, who knows? Maybe that's the ultimate why we're here, right? Like, why are we here? The existential question, right? It's like,
Mm,
you know, it's to know exactly how much how much freedom do you desire and how much effort that will cost you.
mm,
Because nothing comes for free, right? There's always a exchange of energy. There's an exchange of something there, right? So, you know, if that's if you want that ultimate freedom, what are you willing to sacrifice for it? A little sleep, a little effort, a little study, doing things that
and
are
and
uncomfortable to
and
some degree.
if we're thinking about this as like an evolutionary process, right? It's kind of like that Rupert Sheldrake's morphic resonance thing, right? It's like
Correct.
he was saying that the first time a unique molecule is crystallized, like it's hard, the more times that molecule is crystallized in that way, the easier it becomes to there's less friction because you're creating this like energetic mold for the reality of that, which is the
Right.
same as like that breaking the 4 minute mile thing, right? It's like,
Correct.
so we're just trying to like actualize the human potential for this kind of like freedom and self-awareness that
Right.
exists within us but in potential, but like every human being that does what we're talking about or tries to do what we're talking about is like helping to break the
The mold.
resistance and the mold and the momentum associated with like being unconscious, being asleep, and
Right.
you know,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah,
And moving closer and closer to that ultimate freedom, right? On demand, right? So it's like that's the idea. So um people can decide if that's something that is intriguing and they want
right.
to express. I mean, look, nobody says making $1 million is easy, or I mean the people that already have $1 billion say that making $1 million is easy, but they already have that mold
Right.
produced,
Past.
right?
Yeah.
And they've used it multiple times for the same thing. So, but initially it's a pretty difficult process and many of them fail many times before it happens. We don't hear that much about it. It just sort of I mean, they do admit it, right? But um and we sort of internalize it now, but it's become part of the program as well, right? It's become part of the consensus and what people think about that stuff. So people are already convinced that it's extremely difficult to do that, and you have to fail multiple times to get that going. Well, I mean, how many things don't survive the evolutionary unfoldment, right? It's like there are plenty of species that have gone the way of the dodo or whatever. So, um, it's like, it's going to happen. It's going to happen with or without you. Do you want to be involved in it? Do you want to be like an early adopter or, somebody who's like, like an evolutionary explorer, let's say, right? And trying to see how far. I have no idea how far this will go. I really don't. I mean, I love to speculate about it. That's like my, pipe dream of like talking about this stuff. Where could it go? But I know I can go farther than I am right now. I just don't know what the end result will be. I don't know how far it will go. You know, so time is our biggest enemy when it comes to that, right? Which is another thing that kind of goes askew when you get into the lucid dream, because that time dilation happens there, and you can pack in a ton in a very physical reality, short period of time. But to there subjectively, it can be extremely, extended, right? So yeah, all of those, there's just so, to me, for me, and again, it's just because of what I do and how I feel about it doesn't mean to convince everybody else, but I just feel like if people are wondering about the value of it, I mean, I can't think of anything else at this point that would have as much value to me, as far as practice, a spiritual practice or whatever, And in the beginning it was just entertainment for me, right? Like other than that realization that I had the first time but when I first started doing it, I mean, it was like when it was getting, let's say more consistent, um, maybe about one or one or two a month, let's say. Um, it was just about exploring and having fun and flying and, visiting places and doing things and whatever, like everything under the sun that you can think of, you know. Unfortunately for me, I have um, I don't, I don't relish that type of activity that much, right? So it gets boring to me really quickly. So after about 12 or 13 of those, I was sort of like, okay, is this all there is? What else can I do with this? And so that's what started me. And because I was really into my spiritual practice at the time, I thought, can I do something of that here? What would happen? What will go on? Can I make this part of my practice and and make it maybe I at the time I hadn't thought it would be the you know the pinnacle of my practice, but I just thought, well, it only made sense that if you could have the perfect laboratory for that and you could do it anywhere, like if you wanted to do meditation, like, I mean, this is how basic, I mean, everybody's going to be a little bit different, right? But in my poor basic mind, it was like, my meditation will be better if I do it in Tibet.
The real
So
question
I
is,
would
the
transport
real
myself to
question is,
Tibet.
was it?
Not really that I know of. It wasn't like I got a ton more out of it or anything. I just had those thoughts, like I didn't know. I was experimenting with everything because I didn't know, right?
Yeah,
So everything was sort of fair game, right? Like, does location make a difference? Does this have, well, if it makes a difference in your mind, then it makes a difference, right? But it
right,
wasn't like, oh, I kind of woke up and how come the bedroom's so bright? Because you're glowing. It's like, no, that didn't happen. It would have been weird. Would have been cool, but it would have been weird, right? So, yeah. I mean, so it all starts out like that. Each person's going to take their
yeah,
own individual path depending on what they are trying to achieve. But, even those, let's say, entertainment paths will sort of peter out after a while, for people. I mean, you can only go to so many beaches. You can only go to so many whatever, like, I mean, people's have wild imaginations, right? So they can imagine all kinds of things. And, for some people, maybe that is the end of it. They'll get sort of trapped in that cycle. That'll become their new part of their routine, right? And so I've just not been good with that type of thing because I think it takes away from that ultimate freedom, right? It's like I don't want to just go to a different reality and be trapped in a different routine there, right? It's like I want to have the freedom to experience something, come back, try something different, come back. make it better, have some impact on my physical existence or the way that I feel about moving in this world or the way that I understand it on a practical level. Um, and that's just my bent, right? So, but for everybody it could be a little bit different, but um the process is pretty much the same, right? It's like, don't take it too seriously, don't make it work, because work already has a bad connotation to it. Know that you'll need to put effort into it, just like getting off the planet, right? But it's stages of that, right? It's like, don't just go into it, unless you have all the time in the world and, the freedom to stay in bed as long as you want or whatever. You don't have to do it every night or whatever. You change it up, do these other exercises as well, sort of build the platform on it so that you'll have more control once you get more consistently in, right? And then you'll be able to shift it and change it and do whatever you need to do and experience it in different ways and find not just the novelty in it, but the practicality of it as well, right? Does doing that just change you fundamentally inside, the way that you feel about yourself, the way that you feel about the world and your life? That's already a huge benefit, right? So it's like, look, I'm telling you right now, if you lucid dream consistently 3 times a week, if that's a goal for you, if you hit that goal and it's consistent for you, you're going to be in 2% of the world population that could possibly do that. And that's attainable by anybody, really, I mean, it really is. So you just have to, and then the percentages get smaller and smaller, the more of that you have, right? And we're talking decimal point 0.0000, of people like probably Sadhguru and people that, are in other traditions as well, that can just that they're there all the time, right? They can sort of move in and out, that there's not much difference between their physical reality and their dream reality, right? They even express it that way, that this is the waking dream, that's the sleeping dream, right? And so, but after a while, it's hard to differentiate between the two, and not because you're so deluded that you can't differentiate. They're not deluded, they differentiate just fine, right? So it's that things start to acquire, you know, less permanence here, less um, physical fixedness, right? And that's the assumption. That's I no, but for these guys, when I talk to some of them, that's the way that they express it. And I think that that stuff happens, sort of on the periphery in the beginning. It's not controlled by the person. I think they just start noticing that things aren't as fixed as they normally would be, and things just happen, right? And then they learn some element of control around it for the very best of the best, right? The superstars of that world. And so, but even, you know, it's the same, it's that same percentage, that 2% that like are the ultimate, and then 2% of them are in that next ultimate, and the 2% of them are in that super category, until you finally get to, you know, a couple of people or whatever that are just like, they can move in and out of that with ease and change their, supposedly change their realities and physical reality as well and all of that stuff. But they've learned enough where they're not just doing that willy-nilly, right? So that hopefully they have, the wisdom to,
Right.
to not do that from all their experiences moving into that. I think all of these things take time because you need to build up that experience level where your experience becomes wisdom.
Maturity.
You know when to apply it, how to apply it, you know, you've lost a bunch of that self that says, I need to be recognized, the I need to be a god, I need to be the one that everybody looks up to, or the one that everybody goes, oh my God, it's Dustin. It's like,
Right.
you know, And because everybody has some of that to one degree or another, but I think through these experiences and seeing that it's way better to sort of be under the radar and have your experiences and enjoy them with the people around you and do whatever, but you know, not in a way that makes you stand out. In fact, they probably hide away for the most part because they don't want there's nothing like having everybody waiting on every word that you say or everything that you do to rob you of the freedom that you fought so hard to get.
Mm,
It's like you see how that's like a trap. It's a
mm,
trap. It's like you fought so hard to be free. And now, look at these, actors and actresses that can't freaking leave their house without 100 paparazzi flashing at them all the time. And, like Jesus Christ, it's like, what's the use of fame if you can't live an extraordinary life? And you can't engage with other people without them, stumbling over themselves on you or whatever, right? That's not freedom. That's being jailed. That's being more and more bindings, more and more restraints being put on you.
right.
So it's the opposite of what we're looking for.
Cool. Well, I feel like that's a pretty good first conversation around like this kind of
The
second
general idea and
stage
yeah,
of lucid dreaming, especially from like a motivational perspective, because again, that first, like, what do you want? Why do you want it? Exercise of writing those things out, like a lot of the things I think we talked about in this conversation, at least kind of give me a different perspective on the why, you know, that I
right,
think will help to tap more internal resources to be
right.
able to like get through the escape velocity of doing it. So,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
so I know there's we kind of touched on things like erasing personal history, and any of the like practices that you mentioned, or I mean you talked about burning meditation, which is available on our website as a standalone thing. And I would invite like anybody who is curious about some of the um any of the initial like lucid dreaming practices to listen to some or all of the first series of lucid dreaming talks and practices that we did, because there was just a ton of exercises that we talked about in there,
Right,
um, that we won't necessarily go into again really formally here, but in our future conversations, I'm sure we'll talk more about practical like practices and go over some of the things that we'll be doing to like get in and make it
right.
consistent and stabilize and things like that. And
Sure.
so yeah, I just thought that was great. So thanks.
Good. No problem. I'm, happy to tease it out with you,
Yeah.
so hopefully it'll,
Yeah, I
help
feel
you
like,
break some of the bindings and
yeah,
get your momentum started. It starts with a vibration, right? And then
right.
yeah,
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
out there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Cool.
cool. All right. So, and if anybody has like questions for us or for you,
Yeah.
the best way to do that is I I think through the membership,
Yeah,
if people are interested in coming in and
absolutely.
joining us on the live Q&As. So,
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah. Plus when in the membership too, there's like direct emails and things as well, so that both of us would get them
on school in the
on
school
school. Right.
platform. Yeah.
Exactly. So,
All right.
okay, cool.
Cool. Thanks, man.
All right, man. Good to go.
Thanks for watching and listening to today's episode of the To Be Silent podcast. If you have questions and you're looking for more support, with your practice, we invite you to go to tobesilent.com and check out the To Be Silent membership. It's a school community where every other week we're going live with our members for live Q&A sessions and support in the on our online platform. So yeah, if you're curious to learn more and curious to connect with more like-minded people and to have more interaction with us, we invite you to check it out. It's a lot of fun and we love it. So hope to see you on the inside. Talk to you soon.